never really pictured or visualized myself, FTSE 100 CFO. That was never kind of when I closed my eyes and thought about what does the future look like. That was not it. I think in a series of very fortunate events, I probably found my way back to my North Star, and I've got to the size of the organization where I'm really comfortable. I can make the difference I want to be able to make.
Hello and welcome to The Journey to CFO, ACCA's new podcast where we explore the real stories behind the title. In each episode, we'll be speaking to leading CFOs across the profession just to uncover the successes, the challenges and the lessons that they've learned on their journey to become a CFO. I'm your host, I'm Rachel Shorter, CFO and founder, and today I'm joined by Sinéad McCormack. Thank you, Sinéad, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Sinéad is a qualified accountant with 23 years experience, holding senior positions in financial services and higher education. And this includes Barclays, Bank of England and the University of Manchester. Having started her career at Aspect, Capital, AIG and Barclays, Sinéad then joined the Bank of England as a senior manager and then went on to report as head of finance for Hoist Finance. Sinéad most recently became a member of the leadership team for the University of Manchester, Faculty of Medicine, Biology and Health before joining Medicines Discovery Catapult as Chief Financial Officer. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Applying her finance skills that she's gained in private and public sectors, Sinéad is responsible for overseeing all of the finances, the financial management, IT and procurement. Well, welcome to the seat, Sinéad, and lovely having you. So when we spoke not too long ago, we spoke about your journey and the trajectory and how you landed here. And I just wanted to bring to the fold that you started in financial services and then you pivoted. So talk us through the journey and how you managed to pivot there.
So I suppose my journey started when I was very young. I think I was destined to be an accountant. I think I said to you, it was either going to be the army or accountancy, and the army didn't want me, so accountancy got me. So I did my degree in accountancy and finance. I specifically chose degrees when I was applying for universities that would give me as many exemptions as possible because I was rearing to be an accountant as quickly as possible. And I left university. I chose ACCA, of course. And I had actually selected that, again, quite geekily, had picked the ACCA route quite young. So it probably was about 18 and 19 when I had decided that ACCA was the way for me.
Wow.
And it was, the late 90s, early noughties in Ireland, and everybody was going into hedge funds. So it was all, it was all about go to Dublin. There's a big hedge fund market there. And my first ever job was in PFBC in Dublin, and it was an absolute blast. It was a fantastic place to work. And that started me in my journey. And actually, it was it wasn't quite the journey I'd expected. I kind of thought as an accountant, I would go in and I would do the books. It would be lots of debits and credits and there'd be lots and lots of journals. And my first role, there wasn't a journal to be found because actually I was a trustee, which meant that we reviewed was a trading account. So it was quite an interesting role to have, quite technical actually. And I got to use a lot of technical accountancy skills. And it meant I had to read an awful lot more legal documents early in my career than I thought I'd ever even considered. I don't know why in my journey I'd never thought actually accountants really do need to understand contracts. That's why you do a law module, so that you actually will use it. And so from there I flitted over to Bermuda for a year and then I came back to London and I steadily went through the financial services and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the technical complexity of it. You can do so much across financial services. You can do everything from really, really honed in technical accounting, M&A work, you can business partner, you can do financial control. So it was a really lovely environment actually to really learn my kind of, learn my trade, I suppose, for want of a better term. And then I kind of grew up. I moved around lots of different places. And as I did, I grew up and I had a family. And after my first child, I was given the opportunity to move to the Bank of England from Barclays. A bunch of colleagues that I'd worked with in Barclays went over to the Bank of England. And there was an opportunity for me there. And there was something in the Bank of England struck me. It was the first time I'd ever worked somewhere where actually the bottom line was important, but it was important for a different reason. It was important because what they were doing in the Bank of England was really important to how the economy worked. And actually everything in the finance function was around enabling that and ensuring that the Bank of England actually was running in a really sustainable way. And I thought, actually, this is really interesting because I get to do this but for a different purpose. I quite like that driver.
Yeah.
And so it kind of struck me at that point, what does this resemble?
Yeah.
And I think it was actually when we were doing a big systems upgrade and we sat down in a room and we were like, we can't go to Barclays, our old colleagues, and go, what do we have as a system over there? Because that doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit the culture or the ethos of the Bank of England.
Yeah.
That's not the sort of institution we are. And when we really sat down and thought about it, we're like, actually, it's academic by nature. We're far more like an academic type organisation with that really golden kind of lens and clear strategy around every decision has to be made in a way that allows the Bank of England to do the best thing for the British economy and actually play its part. So we actually started to talk to universities and I just really liked what I seen there.
Yeah.
So when we got to this, baby number 2 came along then and we were thinking about, was it our firstborn's education? We decided to move to Manchester. And I did go back into financial services to facilitate that, as part of facilitating that role. And actually, I was very lucky that it was a great organisation in Hoist and really enjoyed who I worked with. But a role came up in the University of Manchester as a head of faculty finance. And I thought, actually, that's for me. That is for me. If somebody there gives me a chance and takes somebody who has absolutely no higher education experience to come over, that's the role for me.
Yeah.
And I think that Bank of England role, had that not happened, I'd probably still be in financial services and I'd still be quite happy.
Yeah.
But there was just something around that environment that really struck me that this is where I'm happiest, this is where I perform best. And actually, hence, and so I don't think, MDC would never have happened for me. And it is the best thing that's happened for me. I career-wise, it's fulfilling every ambition I've ever had.
Yeah.
But it's just a fantastic organisation to work with. So I'm very lucky.
I think it's so nice when you can be in these positions and have the balance between happiness and purpose and what I'm doing and applying your technical skills as well. So congratulations on having it all rounded, because some of us don't. So just going back to that, was it always the North Star to be a CFO?
I think it was, actually. And so my dad worked in a factory in my local town, and so the CFO term didn't exist then. What did it? It was financial controller, and then it got a finance director. So I am that old. The CFO really wasn't a title, so I didn't know I wanted to be CFO. But I thought I quite liked the job. What the guy who was referred to as the financial controller there did. I was like, I like that. And the reason I liked it was because the guy was involved in all the business decisions. He wasn't just in the corner doing the numbers somewhere. He was part of thinking about what their strategy would be. The work that team did, and I could see from what my father was talking to me about, I thought, that's the part. I want to be able to do something that makes a difference in the organisation. I really like that role. So I don't necessarily know how well formed that thought was, but that was always, when I had accountant in my mind, that was the type of accountant I wanted to be.
Right.
So without even knowing it was. And I think, again, when I look back, and again, probably not, particularly well formed as a thought, I think in actual fact, it was always an SME. In my head, it was always going to be an SME. It was always going to be kind of somewhere between 1 and 250 was it employees. It wasn't, I'd never really pictured or visualized myself, FTSE 100 CFO. That was never kind of, when I closed my eyes and thought about what does the future look like, that was not it. So I think in a series of very fortunate events, I probably found my way back to my North Star, and I've got to the size of the organisation where I'm really comfortable. I can make the difference I want to be able to make, and I can make the impact I'd like to be able to make.
And I think that's the important piece, is that you're making impact, you're adding value. And what I really found interesting is that in every conversation we had, you mentioned your father. And when it comes to, especially as women, when we're going into some of these rooms that aren't necessarily built for us and we have to almost draw up our own seat, and especially being a head of business, it can be quite tricky. And something that really stuck with me when we had our conversation was you always had that support. And that was the person that spoke life into your career.
Yes.
How did that help you navigate your career?
Oh, I think I was sent into the world with a huge amount of confidence, and I would think, I don't think I ever thought, oh, I'm a woman, I can't do that. Because at no point in my entire childhood did any mad idea that I came up with for a career ever did the words escape my father's or my mother's mouth to go, oh, girls don't do that job. So I think I told you a funny story. At one point I took a notion that I wanted to join the US Coast Guard. Clearly the biggest issue to that was the nationality. But at no point did my parents say, oh, that's not a job for girls. My poor father actually went and got me the application form, knowing full well I couldn't do it. But just actually to show that level of support. So nothing in my head was undoable. My gender was never going to get into my way. And I would say that I've been incredibly lucky in my career that I've worked in organizations where I have had male leaders who advocated for you based on talent. So I think I've been really lucky based on I've worked in organizations where it's meritocracy. If you have the talent, you will be put forward. I think I've sat in one room once where actually I felt conscious. If I wasn't a woman, I don't think I would be getting spoken to this way. And I think that's a very fortunate position for me to be in. But I do think the women that came before us and actually are pulling us up have done such an incredible job. And I think that's, and I think there's a saying, if you don't see it, you can't be it, isn't there? And I think we were probably fortunate that we were one of the generations coming in that actually could see women moving into those senior. There's still more work to do because you do see our representation drop off as you get kind of more and more senior. You do look at those FTSE 100s and you start thinking, actually, there could be a little bit more representation of women. And for many, many reasons, we bring a different perspective. Companies with a diversity we know are more profitable. They do better. They're more sustainable in every way. So I do think, but I think if it hadn't been for that grounding, where I just never, it's kind of oblivious. I was really fortunate.
Absolutely.
I joked with my dad; he was a feminist before we even, before he even realised that men could be feminists. So I was incredibly lucky.
That's quite funny. So we're just going back to your mid-career, and you mentioned that family was built in there. Was there any point when you were making any of your role decisions that you thought, I need to be strategic here?
I did make decisions that I thought were strategic and occasionally look back now and realise not so strategic. But I think for me, some of the drivers for making moves from organisations were probably actually somewhat driven by my personal life or things that were going on in my personal life. But actually, when I came to choosing the organisation that I worked for, they became quite strategic.
Right.
So when I moved to London, for instance, it would have been incredibly easy for me to go down the compliance route. Compliance was very big at the time. I had a huge amount of experience on the implementation of the US Patriot Act and actually the practicalities of that. And it was a very, very hot area in London. But I held to my guns because at that point I had decided quite clearly that's not the route I want to go down. I can actually, if I go down that route, I'm never coming back. And I really pushed until I got put forward for financial control roles. Wow. And that's when I managed to get put forward for the Aspect Capital role. And I think had I not done that, my role would have been, my entire career trajectory would have went in a very different route. And I knew there was a debit and credit loving girl in there who wanted to do balance sheets and P&Ls and cash flow statements and just loved and thrived on that. And you just don't get that on the compliance side. So, it does tickle an awful lot of your interest, but for me, it wasn't the thing that I wanted to do. And so for me, I think that's probably the thing. If you ask me in my 20s, I wouldn't have really necessarily thought my personal life or where I was and my personal journey would impact quite so much. So Barclays came about because my now husband and I worked for AIG, so it didn't make any sense. And as two good accountants realised having your mortgage reliant on one organisation wasn't our best choice. And we were both fairly early career at the time. You know, my children being born meant I made decisions. But I think when I made those decisions, I did make sure that I went for roles that I felt were continuing the trajectory. So I may have left where I was based on something that was happening in my personal life, or responding to what my children might need and what's the best thing for us as a family was. But I never lost sight of where what I wanted to be career-wise.
No, that's a really important message, because what you're also displaying is that you can take different pathways, but as long as you know what the North Star is and you're resilient and you keep pushing through, you can get it if you really work for it. So I think that's a really important message. So now we're in a CFO position. What surprised you the most when you transitioned from, I think it went from faculty into CFO?
The board wasn't quite the big scary thing I thought it was going to be.
Right.
I think you come up, don't you? We've been told, oh, we need this for the board and we need that for the board. And you do. You need all of those things for the board. But I think I thought that the board was some big looming kind of talking head that just was there to catch you out. And I think the positive surprise was that actually your board is there because they want the best for the company.
Correct.
And actually you're all on the one side, and that all they're looking for is transparency and openness and meaningful reporting. And if you can bring that, actually your board is your biggest advocate. So I think that was actually a really positive surprise. And I think actually as CFOs, there's something we can do to maybe demystify or demythify that for people in our teams, because you want your team to be able to step in and go to a board meeting when you're not around, because we get holidays too. And they're not always particularly well planned. You know, so you don't want anyone walking into that room thinking, oh my gosh, I could misstep here. You can never misstep as long as you're open and transparent. I think other things, I think I felt I went in thinking I have to fix everything in 90 days. I have to stamp, I have to stamp my mark on this. I have to show I'm capable of this job. And I suspect it put me and my team under a ridiculous amount of pressure for those first 90 days. And had I just chilled out a bit and went into listening mode more and heard them, I think I would have come up with a calendar for implementation that would have been far better for all of us involved. And we got there. And I was incredibly lucky that I had and still have a really strong head of finance who was just amazing and continues to be amazing. But I think both of me and her could look back on that period and go, yeah, actually, you could have just chilled out, Sinead. You know, what were you doing? But I think there's that pressure on you, especially in your first CFO role. You're so desperate to show, I'm not going to let you down. I have this, you know, I've got the goods. That actually you can maybe just twist yourself in the wind a little bit. So you know, if I was talking to somebody who's going into a CFO role now, I would say those first 90 days are hugely important, but they're hugely important that actually you sit and listen, because it's likely that the team that are there already know the answers and actually already have a fairly good idea of what the priorities are. You just need to be an enabler. And if there are improvements that you can make above and beyond that they haven't been seen, then actually there's a way to weave that in a way that is not going to just spin everybody out and, you know, make it look like you're a whirlwind.
And you spoke on some really important messages there. Like one of them is you go into listening mode. When we tend to always see like books being written about this is what you do and how to achieve like the best you can as a CFO in your first 90 days. And what we're not really thinking about is how do we actually wrap our arms around the business and a team and become one of the most influential leaders that are going to be in the business. And just touching on leadership. So now you have a team. You mentioned that you have a great team. Any leadership challenges or anything that you've been burnt by that you're looking back now saying that was a good lesson?
Oh gosh, probably far too many to mention. I suspect I've made some I haven't even realised I've made. It it probably isn't my natural space. It's probably why the army didn't want me. But it's, and I think I'm probably inclined towards pace setting, which can be, difficult both for me to crack myself out of and, for others around me sometimes. So I do try to be more mindful of that.
Yeah.
But I think for me, from a leadership perspective, I'm fortunate, I think, to have been surrounded for most of my career by really strong teams.
Okay.
And I think that's really important. I think it's really important to surround yourself with people who are better at aspects of your job than you are. Because actually there's no point trying to be the expert in everything. You won't be.
Yeah,
and if
exactly
you
that.
are, you haven't hired well. Because actually you should have people in your team who know how to do aspects of your job better than you do. So that, I think, would be my key leadership thing, is surround yourself with people that you trust, who more importantly trust you, and make yourself available in a way that you can be trusted, and they will speak openly to you and challenge you. Because if you can't be challenged, then you won't actually hear when you're making a mistake until it's far too late and you've made the mistake. And so I think those are the things that I would say I try my best to execute, but I am still learning as a leader. I have a long way to go.
It doesn't stop. And I think that's the most important thing, is that we feel that when we reach the North Star, is that that's it, we've made it. But actually the learning and the evolution of us as within leadership positions, and us as a leader and us as a finance head off or CFO, is that the learning just continues. Businesses evolve, technology evolves, we have to keep moving with the times. I speak on the fact that, I have a great team, but the team I have today might not be the team that I need tomorrow, because the business is changing, technology is changing, tools are changing. Now, when you transition from the faculty into the CFO position, you said that this was a position that spoke purpose to you. It was just something that was really, really close. How did you prepare yourself for that transition?
I don't know if I did. I think it might have been, I think I might have been so delighted with myself that I kind of thought, this is great. I think back on getting the role, I made sure I knew as much as I could about the sector. I already knew quite a bit, but I wanted to know a little bit more. So I did try to read up a little bit on it. I was very fortunate that the CPO, who is still my colleague, who was still the CPO, gave me a lot of her time on my transition. So she and I spent some time talking so that I could understand what was going on, what were the priorities, what were they thinking beyond what I heard in the interview. Because you get a little bit of this is why this role is here in the interview, but mostly they're trying to get to know you. So there's not, there just isn't time. So I think that was probably the biggest preparation. And I was, and I think, again, that was an offer to me. And I was very lucky and very fortunate that was offered to me. And I took it up, and I probably took advantage and asked for a lot of it. But again, I would absolutely recommend to anybody who is moving roles to ask to speak to other, members of the leadership team. And actually spend some time with them in advance of hitting the role, so you can hear what's going on and you understand, and you can start to build some of that relationship with them. But I think that, but that also eased my transition in, having the CPO there and having spent so much time chatting with her. Actually, it felt an awful lot easier to kind of go in as a colleague then, because I already had somebody that I felt that I knew.
Because I feel like it's 50% technical and what you know, and then it's 50% like personality and fit within the business. And a lot of the times that's some of our biggest failings when we transition up from or into our next senior leadership role. We just believe that our experience and our technical ability is going to speak for itself. But actually, when you get to that position, most of it is how you fit within the business. Most of it is your ability to go out and actually learn the business and lead the business and inspire some of the people in the business, because that's what we're there to do. So going back to the career and you're transitioning now into your CFO role, looking back, any setbacks that you're looking at thinking, actually, that one, but we still made it?
again, probably too many to mention. I think I went. So my job after I left was at PFBC. I went off to Bermuda, and that was because I wanted to come to London, and I had no idea how to come to London to be an accountant. So I wandered past a recruitment agency in Dublin that had a big sign on it saying we do international recruitment, and I thought, well, they must do Dublin. They did not. They did Bermuda and the Cayman Islands, and I ended up in Bermuda.
Wow.
And that was very much a compliance role. It was actually on the shareholder side of it. So actually onboarding shareholders, doing their anti-money laundering, their KYC, all of that stuff. And so whilst Bermuda was a great laugh, actually career-wise, it probably wasn't the best decision I made. It wasn't it really wasn't the path I wanted to go on. And I had a great time in Bermuda, but I think to myself, that wasn't your best idea. To just because they give you a free flight doesn't mean you really should have done it. And so I think that was why I was so absolutely laser focused when I did make it to London after that. Yeah. And it's been really clear with recruitment agents around, no, actually, I'm not making that mistake again. Yeah. I'd rather just hang this out and hope to goodness I do actually get a job before I run out of savings. Yeah. I think there's been times, certainly, on the leadership side of it, where I kind of think maybe I didn't do something right. And I think that's probably where you end up with the most amount of regrets, is when you look back at how you handled a situation and think, I could have been a better person in that moment. I really didn't think that through. And even now, there's times where colleagues will say, there's times where I just get a little bit deep in the numbers, and I'm like, but that's in the numbers. Yeah. And they're like, you need to step back, Sinead, and actually, bring it to life. So I think that's the other thing. When we're stressed, we kind of go into our comfort zone. Yeah. And I think for me, that's the part where I have to keep reminding myself when there is a more stressful situation, that I don't go into my comfort zone and just barking numbers at people and go, why don't you get this? Yeah. And actually remembering to tell the story that the numbers are telling me, because I will look at it and go, I see this because of those numbers. But that in the same way my colleagues look at small molecules and see something that I will never see, they have to bring that story to life for me. I need to bring the story, the numbers to life for them. And I think that's a part that's a mistake that I have to keep reminding myself not to make.
Okay, so one thing that I've learned, especially with those that are coming up in their careers, that they get really hung up on job titles, compensation, but it's so much broader than that. What do you think members are worrying about today that just won't matter in 10 years' time?
I think titles. I think at that mid-career stage, I did it. I fixated on titles. I got really annoyed about titles. I got frustrated about titles. And to the point where I was actually losing sight of the experience that I was getting on a day-to-day basis. Right. I think speed of promotion as well. Yeah. I think very often people get quite frustrated that they're not getting promoted fast enough, and sometimes to the detriment of taking sideways moves where they can actually get that breadth of experience. Yeah. And I do think this stage of your career is where you need to make that decision about whether you want to be a deep technical expert in any areas, or are you going to go down the M&A route? Yeah. Are you going to go down, actually, I am an IFRS expert and there is nothing that somebody can ask me in this that I won't get, and actually that is my background and I will give great technical advice. Or am I going to get a breadth of experience where I'm strong enough in a broad range of fields that actually I can bring that then into more senior leader roles. Yeah. And I think those are the things that we can trip ourselves up mid-career because, and I think don't be scared at that part of your career as well to step into a different role or make sure that you're the one that your boss gets to cover them when they're on holidays. Yeah. Actually, yes, you might go in. Yes, you might not execute it exactly as they would. yes, you might be the most terrifying thing you'll do for a while, but actually let yourself get scared every now and again and push yourself out there.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then they won't ever see you in that role. You have to take those opportunities to be seen doing that role before you'll get the role. And I think that's the other thing. And don't be scared to move around. Yeah. That's the other thing. You don't have, I kind of stayed 3 to 5 years, tends to have been my history. I bounced around a little bit quicker than that sometimes.
Yeah.
But, I think for me, I would get to a point where I would genuinely take a step back and assess, what am I getting from this role? Am I still learning from it? Am I connected to the organisation?
Yeah.
And if I'm not, do I think it's maybe time that actually I moved somewhere else where I'm starting to learn more?
Yeah.
And I think that's something, and been really disciplined with yourself then about what roles you actually go for. So try, where you're fortunate enough to be in a position where you can actually take your time to get your next role, make sure that you're really thinking through, what are the parts of my CV that I'm weak on now that I'd like to fill, and actually target roles in that will fill those for you, would be the other area. But in the latter end of it all, in 10 years' time, nobody will care what your title was 10 years ago. They just won't.
Absolutely.
And actually you will be seen far more positively if you've taken lots of kind of lateral moves to build up your experience, and that'll actually be looked at really favourably in your CV.
Absolutely, because that's what's going to give you the breadth. That's what's going to give you the depth of what the business is doing, and a more firmer landscape. So that's some really good advice. So we come to the end of the podcast, but before our listeners go, I would like to ask you, what are the 3 nuggets, the 3 takeaways, if anything, that they should take away from this podcast today?
Back yourself, I think, is the first one. If you don't back yourself, nobody else can.
Absolutely.
So you have to back yourself, surround yourself professionally and personally with people who back you as well. And that doesn't mean telling you you're great all the time. That also tells you that's also the people who you trust you enough, and you trust them enough to tell you when you've been an idiot. So I think have those people in your life, and don't be scared to actually accommodate your own personal life. Nobody, when we qualified in ACCA, nobody asked us to hand over our personal lives. And actually we do this because we want to be professionally fulfilled. But you want to be professionally fulfilled so that when you're at home in the evening doing whatever it is in your personal life that you love doing, that actually you're not regretting your professional decisions. So just make sure you make decisions that actually benefit and support your personal life.
Absolutely. Sinead, thank you so much for joining us on the ACCA's podcast, A Journey into CFO. It's been an absolute pleasure, and you've given us some great nuggets and takeaways. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed the conversation and took away some great and valuable insights and some good nuggets. And if you did, make sure you subscribe, engage, and share with your communities. You'll find more information of our upcoming episodes on our ACCA LinkedIn page. A huge thank you to our guest, Sinead. Thank you for joining us today and for sharing your experience and insight. Until next time, thank you for listening. I am Rachel Shorter, your host, and you are tuned into ACCA's Journey to CFO.